once again, and welcome to another episode of The Arbiters Go to the Movies, a special side project of Arbitration Studios. What's going on, everybody? May the 4th be with you. I'm JP Arbiter.
I'm Mrs. Arbiter.
And we decided to hop in on this really, at the last possible minute.
Yeah.
Do
we ever do things on time?
No. I just... There was a Dragon Ball Z Abridged did a version, an abridged abridgment for the Namekian Saga, and it all started with tick tock, and then Krillin shouted, "Let's go to space!" And I think that's a perfect summation of how we got to this particular project. So, Mrs. Arbiter, what are we talking about today?
Star Wars.
And not just any Star Wars, not a specific movie. We're going to cover the whole damn thing. Now, in previous installments of The Arbiters Go to the Movies, it was a plot summary with jokes interspersed or comments on, production values or weirdness of stuff and whatnot. We're not doing this. This is going to be more of a general love letter for things. So, before we get started on the movies and other stuff itself, let's start with getting a few credentials out of the way. I'd like to say that you and I are part of the second generation of Star Wars fans, because I was born in 1983.
I was born in 84.
So, in fact, I was born scant months before Return of the Jedi hit to theaters. So, I never saw the original Star Wars trilogy in movie theaters until that mid-1990s re-release period. Much the same with you, I'm sure.
Uh-huh.
Did you ever see the original trilogy in theaters when they were in that re-release?
I don't remember seeing those, actually. I remember I'd watched them all, and I didn't really go out to the movies much.
So but yeah, I mean, for us, we're not part of the old school group of fans who could see the original Star Wars in 1977 in theaters and then fell in love with it. For you and I, we were the home video generation that came afterwards. So that kind of colors things for us. For me,
we should say the VHS generation.
Yes. The VHS generation, indeed. Or hey, here's one that I'm sure none of the newfangled kids have ever heard of: Laserdisc. The Laserdisc set of the original Star Wars trilogy was kind of like my definitive set growing up, and right now it is sitting on a shelf in my dad's condo right now, which is really kind of nifty for me. It's just like, sooner or later, we're going to have to get a Laserdisc player just so I can enjoy that.
Yeah.
And with our own sons, both of whom like Star Wars as well, to play that in front of them and to have them go, there's stuff missing.
Mm-hmm.
Rather than us looking at it, it's just like, wow, they added a bunch of shit. So that's going to be certainly interesting. For me, I mean, the other thing that kind of informs us for us is that we grew up in a period where Star Wars merchandise was
a desert.
Yeah, up until again that 20th anniversary film run in the mid to late 90s, just before the prequel trilogy came out. So it was like, there was unofficial stuff galore, or you could find a Yoda t-shirt that was definitely bootleg.
Yeah.
But there really wasn't any merch until Hasbro bought the license.
Yeah.
So...
It was the dead zone.
What was your childhood experience with Star Wars? Because I know you're from a Trekkie family.
Oh, my mother will always be a huge Trekkie. So, but she also has a good love for Star Wars too. Doesn't quite overwhelm the other side of it, but TV series.
Were you given? So, did you end up recording off of TNT using the VCR, or did you get a box set or something? Or
we may have had a box set at one point, but the best I can remember is we always recorded them. Everything.
So, but
some of my fonder memories were that, and just having to go through the commercials and remember to rewind it, and how many times you can record over it. As you can 3. 3 was the magic number.
For me, I mean, my family were movie hounds more than we were television. We just... I just remember watching a lot more movies than I did TV. We had the HBO package on cable and whatnot, and also did a lot of recording of movies from television. I mean, that's Showtime. One year ran a week of Arnold Schwarzenegger movies, and so that was how I got my Schwarzenegger movie collection, was recording all of those across a week. It was also I got both Hudson Hawk, and there was a Dennis Hopper movie called Nails, which I really want to get again. But digressions.
Well, and what I find so funny is now with the DVRs and the almost built-in DVRs, suddenly that concern of, I have to get home so I can record this, isn't there. And it's so weird to me, having experienced that myself. It's that is so weird.
Or, VCR Plus being a thing, and you had to get the codes off of TV Guide.
Yep.
And then, if you were recording around daylight savings, oh god, did that screw things up.
On top of the fact that TV Guide was actually very important then.
Anyway, so yeah, that's kind of our bona fides as far as Star Wars is concerned. So, buckle in, kids. We are going to be talking about these experiences in the order they were released. So we will start with the original trilogy, and then prequel, and then sequel, and then to other media. So, yeah, like I said, buckle in, kids, and we hope you enjoy.
The Star Wars Cantina, the weirdest creatures you've ever seen. At the Star Wars Cantina, music and blasters and old Jedi masters at the Star Wars.
Mos Eisley Spaceport. You will never find the more wretched hive of scum and villainy. You must be cautious.
So let's start our journey talking about the thing that started it all. The Grand Poobah, the original trilogy. First off, Cracked did a video special, and whenever they talk about Star Wars, they refer to it as the Orig Tridge.
Orig Tridge?
Yeah, should we do that?
No.
No? Okay.
No, that seems weird. Far, far too weird for me.
Fair enough. Obviously, we can go on and on about the big stuff, about revolutionizing visual effects for film, creating this big ass immersive world. I like to start with the fact that there is a trinity of character groups, and it started with a trinity, a duet, and then finally a lone wolf throughout the original trilogy. The trinity character was Han, Luke, and Leia. Mm-hmm. Of course. The princess with more balls than the other two combined. The farm boy turned paladin, and then the everyman that was supposed to be. Han Solo wasn't supposed to be the audience surrogate for everyone. I always argue that that's supposed to be the droids. But Han Solo was definitely supposed to be the, I'm a 20th century space trucker or hot rodder who wandered onto a sci-fi movie set and I don't know how to get out, sort of thing. You know, he was sort of like how in the movie Die Hard, John McClane is making all of these cracks that, you know, the audience would make as sort of a symbol of, haha, I'm in on the joke too. And so for Han Solo, he's always looking around at space wizards and spaceships, and his best friend is a giant walking teddy bear. And he's like, I can't believe I'm in this shit.
Yeah, I look at Han Solo more as the gray area in between the Force. He kind of is this hokey religion.
And calls it that.
So I mean, it's that, but also he's a good antithesis to a lot of the characters.
Meanwhile, with the character of Chewbacca, as we later find out, he should be looking at Han going, are you fucking kidding me? I fought in the Clone Wars. I saw Yoda decapitate 2 of his troops that were ready to off him in the Great Jedi Purge. Alright? Hokey religion's my ass. So yeah, there's that. I mean, it's funny, because, Han also provides this nice little generational gap between Luke and Leia, because here's a character who's supposed to be in his early to mid-30s at this point, and Luke Skywalker and Leia Organa are 19. In fact, it is explicitly stated to be 19, because all of Star Wars is measured on when the Battle of Yavin, which takes place at the end of this movie, happens. And so you know, almost 20 years has passed between when Darth Vader became Darth Vader and when the first movie. I remember when it was just Star Wars, now we call it A New Hope, began. I don't want to say Leia always struck me as the strongest character. I think a lot of that is in hindsight, as a grown-up. I know as a child I was all about Luke simply because he was the lightsaber-wielding boy, and also the fact that he was a student of who was consistently my favorite character in the franchise, which was Obi-Wan Kenobi. I just appreciated Obi-Wan as the great teacher character, and thus I had the student of that great teacher as my favorite character, and that has since evolved. I see Leia, particularly in modern times, as the strongest character because Luke was sheltered all of his life while Leia was a public figure. I mean, she was a princess. She had a noble title. And then when you first meet her, you realize that she is participating in a terror, what the Imperial government considers a terrorist cell. You know, a rebel cell that was running and gunning from the Empire, which means that she has been in shit before.
Yeah.
The fact that later on she picked up Luke's gun and just starts mowing down stormtroopers like Rambo in order to facilitate a temporary escape on the Death Star. I mean, she didn't hesitate. She wasn't going, "Oh my god, I don't know what to do." No, she got in the thick of things. So
she was saying, "Move over, boys."
All right, let's. Where are my trousers? Someone get my beat and switch.
For me, I've always thought of growing up. I always thought Leia was just the cool one because like I never saw the strong female leads.
And particularly one who clearly was in control of the situation. That was something
Yes.
that was not present in a lot of media.
Oh, and very little growing up. Did you see that?
So G.I. Joe had Scarlet and Lady J for those characters, and Scarlet found her ass in prison more often than I care to recall. Uhura in Star Trek and Deanna Troi and Beverly Crusher later in The Next Generation were nothing. Uhura was nothing to write home about until the movies, almost.
Yeah.
And then, as far as Deanna Troi and Beverly Crusher, it took Gene Roddenberry's death in the 4th season of The Next Generation for those two to become fully fleshed out, because Roddenberry couldn't write for women worth a damn, if you ask me. So, so yeah, having Leia out there was very, very, I don't want to say it was revolutionary, because there were other characters or other movies with strong female protagonists that were not exploitative at
Yeah.
the time, like Barbarella, Queen of the Jungle, for example. But because Star Wars basically kicked down the door and said hi to pop culture, that really it made her a paragon.
Yeah, it did.
As a result. Let's talk about the droids.
Yes.
Now, I will always argue that for the original trilogy in particular, but throughout the 9 films of the Skywalker saga, C-3PO and R2-D2 are kind of the audience surrogate. They're kind of the neutral position observers of everything around them.
Yeah.
And granted, and they serve 2 very important functions when you consider classic theater, for example. One, C-3PO, for not being very good at telling stories.
I'm not much more than an interpreter, and not very good at telling stories. Well, not at making them interesting, anyway.
Is the narrator of everything. He is the great choir who is speaking to what is going on and why. He's Sam Neill giving the lament of Loki of Asgard. Sort of situation. Meanwhile, R2-D2 is another aspect of theater, of classical theater. He is the literal Deus Ex Machina. Because think about it, he is a machine, and he has all the tools to make shit happen whenever George Lucas writes himself into a corner.
So he's a plot device.
He is a literal plot device. Because I mean, how often throughout all 9 of these movies have you looked at 3PO at R2-D2 and then later BB-8 and went, when could he do that?
I've done that a lot, particularly
Yes.
more in the animated areas when you see R2-D2 doing the fight, and you're like, wait, what? I have no words.
The rocket packs in Attack of the Clones are my favorite example of, wait, what the shit? So, but when you acknowledge him as that, as the machine of God to move the to move the narrative forward when it's in a rut, it helps that perspective. Yeah. I also like all the jokes that surround the droids in particular. Mm-hmm. The fact that 3PO has been through an absolute ringer, first being basically a build-it-yourself droid kit, and how he has gone... I mean, even in the initial movie, you realize, if you pay attention, you realize that he's had some damage dealt to him because his lower right leg is off color from the rest of him. Most of him is gold, but his lower right leg is silver. In the sequel trilogy, he's like, I know what you're thinking. Where'd I get this red arm? Oh, it's so wonderful, and no one cares. But it's in the comics. And whatnot, and then, yeah, everything bad happens to 3PO. He's shot, he's blown up, and,
Wait. So he's the Deadpool of Star Wars?
Kind of. Before Deadpool was a thing, he gets turned into a literal object of worship. He's dropped from great heights. He's chewed up, he's spit out, and he just keeps... And yes, everything is horrible, and yet he keeps his sunny-ass disposition throughout. It's kind of amazing, really.
And eventually he gets that mental breakdown.
Yes. Meanwhile, R2-D2 has... One, I love the fan joke that R2-D2 has the filthiest mouth of any Star Wars character because everything is censor beeped. Mm-hmm. But you kind of, as you watch these movies multiple times, you kind of realize, you learn what he's saying, or you can interpret fairly well. You know when he's you know when R2 is sad, you know when he's happy, you know when he's hyper, you know when he's in pain, and you know when he's pissed off. I mean,
the bleeps tell it all.
R2 was mouthing back to 3PO when in the original Star Wars when they were going their separate ways. You know, asshole, look, we've been here before. You don't remember because you got your mind wiped, but not me. So that all of that's fun, kind of the fun and games for me on that for the droids, and then and the fact that in side stories and whatnot, seeing them has always made me laugh too.
Oh yeah,
that bit in Rogue One where they were going, well, you'll never find me going into space. Mm-hmm. So, the last big character, the lone wolf, is the one that everyone knows is Darth Vader. Where Darth Vader is built up in the fandom's eyes as this like supreme villain character, right?
Or the absent father, or...
Well,
there are a lot of ways people will interpret it, but the supreme villain is supposed to be the end-all.
Well, Darth Vader is supposed to be a terrifying presence. And I got that as a kid, but as a grown-up, I look at it, and first off, the first time you see Darth Vader is boarding a ship, and the first thing he does is choke a bitch to death. And then the second thing that happens is that Leia is brought up to him, and she mouths off to him like he's nothing. And I guess, like, maybe inside she's, like, pants-shittingly terrified of him. But that did a lot in my mind to weaken the Vader as a character. And then the other side of it is that Vader, when you think about it, he wasn't the primary villain of the first Star Wars movie. I mean, who was it? It's Tarkin, right?
Yeah.
It was Tarkin calling the shots. Vader was on his leash and was acting as his enforcer and answered to him. I mean, Tarkin said, Vader, enough of this shit, when he was choking another bitch. Actually, Vader chokes a lot of bitches in this series, doesn't he?
He does.
Because there was the rebel pilot. There was the Moff in the Death Star. Mm-hmm. he went through admirals left, right, and the center in The Empire Strikes Back. Just...
One's off. You're up next.
And then...
It's like they're being drafted.
I mean, being choked by Vader is kind of a mark of honor almost, because in Rogue One he choked Krennic, and I guess that's it, is that, Vader is Captain Chokey.
After Chucky. Captain BDSM.
Yeah, well, harder, Daddy. What? Life's too short to pretend you're not into kinky shit. But when you think about it, Vader was on a leash in A New Hope, and then in Return of the Jedi, he was a compromised, lost, heartbroken father seeking his son, and torn between his son and his duty.
Duty and family.
Mm-hmm. And because that was a fight where Vader was very clearly holding back against Luke. Actually, he was very clearly holding back against Luke both times that they fought. The first time because he wanted to capture him. The second time again because the actions of The Empire Strikes Back left him emotionally compromised. So that was a. So that kind of left me wondering, why was he so threatening? You had to go into the expanded universe for that. So I never, but even as a kid, I never really got him as a villain. The other side of it too, just tell a little story. Mm-hmm. For Vader, for me, I was 6 years old. And it was Halloween, and I was dressed as Optimus Prime for Halloween. And when I say I was dressed as Optimus Prime for Halloween, I mean I was wearing some official Transformers pajamas and a cheap vacuform plastic mask. So we go to my grandpa's house, and my grandpa was 6'4". About as tall as your dad is.
All right.
Tall, skinny guy. Mm-hmm. Had a bit of the 60-year-old pot belly going on, but other than that.
Yeah.
And, ding dong, and I'm raising my and I'm raising my bag going, trick or, and here's this massive guy wearing my grandpa's black jumpsuit in a vampire cape complete with the cowl that was like up to ear level and a Darth Vader mask and going, Luke, I am your father, with a Usher's flashlight, the flashlights with the red cones. And I just dropped my bag and went screaming and crying to my dad's car, going, no! And then he took the hat off. He was like, no, JP, it's okay. I went by my initials at the time. It's okay. And, gave hugs and lots of full-size candy bars. And, spent time with Grandpa. And apparently, I was thoroughly convinced for a couple of years that Darth Vader was my grandpa. And said that to kids at school. And because later on, that Christmas, I was playing with toys and Star Wars was on TNT. Or so I looked up, it's Grandpa, and just went back to playing with my little Transformers and G.I. Joes and shit, because there were no Star Wars toys at the time. And so that experience kind of left me with a domesticated idea of Darth Vader as well. I will say this. The decision to cast James Earl Jones as Vader's voice was brilliant, and I hope there is some way to digitally preserve that voice and be able to get it to say whatever you want, because J.E.J. he ain't gonna be around forever. And I know that there are going to be times when we want that voice to be available. Mm-hmm. So
Yeah.
Do you have any thoughts on Vader?
I've always thought of Vader. I've never thought much of Vader, actually.
He's always been a set piece.
It feels like he's a set piece, but the thing is, I always, after watching even the first time, I saw him as the puppet. Too much. Which is not a lie, character-wise and story-wise.
Yeah, Vader has been manipulated literally all his entire life.
But
when you think about it, from childhood through to his death.
But I think, jumping in and going through even the Skywalker ones, he's presented more as a icon. Mm-hmm. Or an idol to look up to, more so than a character to be afraid of. Mm-hmm. If you're going by the movies alone, to the point of his skull crushing Kylo Ren's music. Oh, there you are. No, and this is me thinking, this is a one of a kind thing that's being crushed down, and you're just saying that.
I will say this, as far as the movies and the original trilogy movies themselves, there are a couple of things about him that were really kind of brilliant. First off, the fact that when you designed the sets around characters, and where they were clearly home with Leia and with Han and with Luke, they were in places that were covered in earth tones. Luke was raised on a desert planet surrounded by brown and white, or not even white, but like cream colors and rust everywhere, or things that had the edges rounded off. Han Solo, his ship was filthy. It looked poorly maintained. I mean, first impression, what a piece of junk. And greasy and definitely lived in. Leia, when she was finally in her natural element, it was in those ruins. It was in a base in those ruins. Everything was disorganized clutter, and there were bright lights everywhere. And bright multicolored displays everywhere. People were using light pens for stuff, compared to the Empire's computer displays, which were all monochromatic greens.
Yeah.
And to bring up the Empire, who were essentially colorless. Stormtroopers were in pure white armor with a black bodysuit underneath.
Or industrial.
Industrial in nature, that works as well. But even industrial in nature, I mean, the one place where in the Death Star where something was living was that rusted out garbage chute full of color.
Yeah.
Likewise, another way to put it, Cloud City. You knew something was off because all the walls were white. Despite the fact that there was a lot of vibrant color among the people.
Yeah.
And that gave you that sense of unease. But again, the Death Star, the Imperial starships, plain steel walls. The only colors you saw were blue and white on buttons or rank pips. The floors were that polished black, almost glass-like surface.
Yeah.
Their ships were unadorned, whereas the Rebel starships had all of those colors and all those markings on them. So that was good set design. That was good prop design for the various factions.
It gave you identifying marks for this is what's coming next, or this is who it is,
or to clue you in on what was. Or to clue you in on the kind of environment you were supposed to be and how you were supposed to feel. Jabba's palace in Return of the Jedi was a living place. The person who occupied it wasn't good, but it was alive.
Yeah.
You know, there were creatures. It was everywhere. It was a zoo. Literally in the basement.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, so that kind of that gave it vibrancy and body that the Imperial sets never had. The other bit about production value, and I don't think we can really say anything without going forward, was with music. John Williams is going to go down in history as one of the greatest composers ever.
Yeah.
I think. His music was written for movies, but I see that as no different than Mozart or Beethoven or Brahms or Bach or doing stuff for minor nobles in freaking Austria or wherever. The subject, the reason of the music's existence is irrelevant compared to the power and the structure of those themes. The Imperial March has gained life beyond Star Wars to generally mean to generally be a theme of rampant militarism. Or, hey, here is an evil person. Or sometimes humorously, we use the Imperial March for a wedding. When we were announced to the reception, so. Mm-hmm. And you're more musically inclined than I am, so.
Yeah. Well, I've always loved the music. And with any movies, the music literally sets the tone. You have the colors, but the music is the aspect that, as long as you can hear a lot, you can gauge a lot about the characters. From the tones, the instruments used, whether it's bright brass or heavy brass or low bass. It's such a big impact. Those are the movie soundtracks what everyone's going to remember.
And it's
when it used to be Beethoven's symphonies or other symphonies.
And it's funny how the same bar of music, that da 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 da, and how just shifting the tempo and the key that it's in has been able to inform so much of it, whether it's wonder, excitement, the idea that this is supposed to be a soft moment, the idea of, oh my god, this is heart-thumping action, has been able to inform so much of that the saga as a whole.
There's some where actually initially when movies are first being introduced, the music was what told the story more than the story. Because with silent films, all you had was the music and words on the camera. Mm-hmm. Literally, getting the invention of color in there suddenly brought a whole new aspect. And just, it's been one of those long-standing things that everyone looks at.
So, anyway, that's kind of our thoughts on the original Star Wars trilogy. Let's move on to the prequels.
I have a bad feeling about this.
I've often said that there are a couple of things that can be said about the prequel trilogy that can be damning and have been said, but there are a lot of things that can be said that are positive. I always thought that it's best to frame it like frame the prequel trilogy around a core thesis. You have to remember that the prequel trilogy were Star Wars movies that were not made for first generation and even second generation Star Wars fans. They were not made like how the sequel trilogy was for as a thank you or a celebration to those who are always there. They were meant to bring in the same kind of audience that the first trilogy did, and that's children ages 6 to, like, 14.
Pretty much. Well, that's why you had a child as one of the main characters, and you had those prestigious female character.
Now, with that in mind, I mean, 1999, when The Phantom Menace came out, I was in high school, and I will always defend every single prequel movie to my dying breath. That said, I also will acknowledge their flaws. And a lot of those flaws are a result not of casting, not of set design, not even of the possible overuse of visual effects, of which Star Wars was not the only guilty player at the time.
Yeah.
I argue that any flaws that were made were directly because George Lucas was being self-indulgent. Things that I like to point to. The pod racing sequence in The Phantom Menace. I don't want to say that Padme and Anakin's romance is in there, but it definitely overstays its welcome, and it's done from the perspective of a man who didn't understand what he was trying to write, beyond the fact that here are two people who have been emotionally stunted all their lives and are engaged in one of the most emotionally intensive things that a human being can do, which is to carry on a romantic relationship. You're basically talking about two people, two adults, one at the time in their 30s and another one just entering their 30s, getting married, and they've never had relationships before.
It's the whole marrying your high school sweetheart.
Yeah. No real relationship experience at all. They just have the funny, fluttery feelings. The whole midi-chlorians thing, an attempt to explain something that didn't need to be explained because it was explained in the first trilogy. Energy field that exists, it binds us together, it surrounds all things, living and unliving. And now we have little, like, cells, kind of like mitochondria, but not, that also are part of it. It's just, again, self-indulgent, not needed. Did it ruin anything? No.
It would have been better to say the Force is strong with this one. Or
Yeah.
something to that, rather than trying to have a pedometer for it.
Now, before I rag too much on the prequel trilogy, what did it get right? One, it nailed Obi-Wan Kenobi perfectly. Ewan McGregor made a character that I always admired and turned him into something three-dimensional for me. Because yes, we had the old wizened teacher who had seen some shit and was clearly traumatized, and now we got to see him see that transformation start from a brash, arrogant, cocky man who had to witness his own master die, become a teacher himself, and still deal with the trauma of it, and have that turn to being sarcastic and very show-offy.
Almost at moments, after we were just watching a little bit of the original, it's funny how much irony you get when you see Obi-Wan just suddenly smile before he's killed. When he's realizing, I'm doing the same thing that happened to me. Shit.
And then, yeah, I mean, the Obi-Wan Kenobi that we saw in Revenge of the Sith was very much Ewan McGregor channeling Alec Guinness, only without the trauma of it all. It was still very much I'm still the swashbuckling adventurer, ho! But I'm But I'm also wizened at that point. So it was certainly fantastic for that. The prequel trilogy also introduced more interesting side characters and gave them important screen time.
Yeah.
One of the characters I will defend is Jar Jar Binks.
Okay. Why?
Well, one, I have to emphasize this again. This was a movie series that was made for children ranging ages 6 to 14. Jar Jar Binks as kind of the lovable oaf was...
Me's a Jar Jar Binks.
It was overplayed and probably kind of racist in episode 1. But to have him as this chief of staff or stand-in representative when the senator was away. And yeah, he kind of was a great big, God damn it, Jar Jar, why'd you ruin it, when he created, or when he introduced the emergency powers resolution. But the fact is that to have him there as someone who brought all of these high characters down to earth. He was the anchor point.
Yeah.
The everyman that ideally the Jedi and the Senate and the Grand Army of the Republic are all supposed to represent and shield from the horrors of an uncaring universe. And let's keep in mind, failed catastrophically at the end. Was the character annoying? Absolutely. But he was sympathetic for me.
I think the idea of the character was neat. Mm-hmm. And has its place.
It was just poorly executed.
Civilly executed, I would say.
Mm-hmm. And
just the personality. You would have almost wanted the personality to be more of someone who was at least sounded like they were in their 20s, not 6 years old.
And I would definitely agree with that. But some of the physical comedy moments, I mean, the idea of him as a bit of a klutz, where he got his face tasered, or...
Well, he's not being on land isn't his natural habitat.
Exactly. He was a almost literal fish out of water. I mean, getting his foot tangled in a saddle harness was another bit of, again, that humanizing moment.
It's also a way of humanizing and showing that as much as you see these all-powerful and awesome characters, they're still...
the exception.
They're still it's a proof of mortality of the characters, one could say.
Other bits and bobs. Granted, we went through villains and henchmen like most people go through crackers and soup. But Darth Maul, Count Dooku, Jango Fett, Zev the Bounty Hunter, all fantastic side characters. General Grievous, I wanted to know more about him yesterday when he was introduced, and we had the Clone Wars animated series for that. Contrast that with Boba Fett, who I personally thought looked cool but didn't care about, because he had 19 words and a scream to him the entire time. Mm-hmm. I mean, Boba Fett was just a cool-looking dude in the background. General Grievous was menacing.
I mean, granted, we do find out a little more background with Boba Fett and his connection to the Clone Wars.
Yes. Afterwards. But that was not introduced organically. That was inserted. Whereas these other side character henchmen were all purpose-built from the ground up. And Darth Maul, in the end, across Star Wars, became one of the most sympathetic characters ever. Because here was a man who was raised from boyhood to be a weapon for the Emperor. And then he was easily discarded at least twice. Once when Kenobi sliced him in half, and then discarded again for by the Emperor during the Clone Wars. So it was, and there's a potential third time. We still need to watch the last episodes of the Clone Wars at the time of recording. So it was, and just to see him by Star Wars Rebels time being a tired, broken old man who's trying to wrest the one thing he had never had from the universe, which is control over his own destiny. And to fixate once again on his last bit of unfinished business, which was with that duel with Obi-Wan. Which for all of like 6 strokes before he finally ended up dying. It was that whole character arc of Maul is one of the most impressive things to have come out of the whole Star Wars saga, and it started with a trained Sith assassin who looked really cool with his red and black tattoos all over his body and a double-bladed lightsaber that had you going,
Oh my god, he's so goddamn cool!
It was the cool factor that drew you in, and then you're just like, okay, I want to know more now.
There was a kid when I saw episode 1 in the theater, which was its own story, but I saw episode 1 in theater with my brother, and we heard this kid's cry, "No!" when Darth Maul was killed.
Oh,
Because Maul was cool. So,
well, it's like the reason you like the Decepticons. Bad guys can be cool.
the bad guys are cooler than the Autobots. The other thing that I really appreciated is that with Emperor Palpatine, who we never got much more than as a presence, and then he was just evil for evil's sake in Return of the Jedi. We see Palpatine throughout this prequel trilogy. We see the conniving politician who can play to people's confidences and be believed. We see the wartime head of state, who, again, we know it's bullshit in the end, but manages to play the I've been pressed into this corner.
Yeah, I can see that.
Bit and Bob. And then we are also seeing him actively pulling the strings when, I mean, it is very clearly Palpatine talking to Darth Maul in episode 1, showing that, oh, hey, this guy who is this guy, there's some tiles being set up and to be knocked over.
Something's going on here.
Dooku, played by Christopher Goddamn Lee, who is having the time of his life.
The Force is with us, Master Sidious.
Welcome home, Lord Tyrannus. You have done well.
I have good news for you, my lord. The war has begun.
Excellent. Everything is going as planned.
Giving the Death Star plans to Palpatine, one of the single most important acts in the Star Wars saga, and it's clearly Ian McDiarmid. They're not even trying to hide it. We see that he's a patron of the arts. He's sitting here at an opera, and he's enjoying himself by the time Anakin shows up. So we get character development for a character that was supposed to be like the grand evil person, and we get to see him build up that house of cards just to make intentionally peel it over. And how he manipulated Anakin throughout that whole prequel trilogy was it was a work of art.
It was.
And then other characters for the Jedi. I mean, it was stunt casting in the extreme, but Samuel L. Jackson as Mace Windu was brilliant.
Just the Senate fight with Yoda.
Oh God,
that was almost like a fanboy dream unto itself.
seeing
But-
seeing Yoda pop out of the corner to sword fight Christopher Lee, holding up his lightsaber like he's got the only lighter in a crack house.
But the fact was that as much as it was kind of almost too big, it was just right.
Yeah, and I think
It made the people who really love the character and love the series just giggle.
yeah, and I think that's kind of the thing that the prequel trilogy can be accused of more than anything else. It was bloated. George Lucas, who took complete creative control for the whole thing, whereas in the original trilogy, he only directed the first one. Two different directors took Irvin Kershner for The Empire Strikes Back, and I forget who did Return of the Jedi. Were in charge of direction, and Lucas was just writing and was producing at a time when producers didn't have control. So, but the prequel trilogy, he had complete creative control, and the movie bloated. It was packed to the gills when it really could have used a lot of trimming down.
Yeah.
And I think that's what, more than anything else, it needed. Now, as far as the sequel trilogy,
I know what I have to do, but I don't know if I have the strength to do it.
the sequel trilogy is it suffers from something that the other two trilogies don't suffer from. They're not unified when you think about it. The Force Awakens was a good let's get back into Star Wars after another 15 years has passed. And they started with Star Wars, the original trilogy, abridged. Right down to Desert Planet, Ice Planet, Jungle Planet. They just shuffled the Ice Planet and the Jungle Planet to be cute in the end and say, "Ha! It's not like the original trilogy."
But and then you get Death Star 2.0.
You have Death Star 2.0. You have big X-Wing space fighter battles. And you
have Death Star 2.0 with the obvious weakness yet again.
Okay. Thank you. The Death Star's obvious weakness was neither obvious nor a weakness, and it has always pissed me off that nerd fanboys have called it that. It was called a small thermal exhaust port. In other words, a heat vent. Now, the Death Star is a planet-sized mobile space station.
Okay.
That generates a lot of heat and a lot of exhaust. That heat and that exhaust have to go somewhere.
True.
If it doesn't go somewhere, things go boom. You want a perfect example of what happens when you do what some idiots have described and say, plug that hole?
Okay.
There's a movie with Eddie Murphy called Beverly Hills Cop. Now, without going too far into the movie, there is a scene where he is trying to evade two Beverly Hills Police Department officers who are staking him out, trying to keep him out of trouble in their jurisdiction. And so he slips around and he shoves a banana in the thermal exhaust port, read tailpipe, of their car. And so when he calls a cab or when he sneaks away from that car after sabotaging it and zooms off in a cab, they try to follow him and boom. The interior cabin of that car gets filled with car exhaust.
Ouch.
Now I want you to picture that on a planetary scale. And to boot, this was a shot that had to be made using a physical projectile of proton torpedo. That's a physical projectile.
Okay.
Into that exhaust port, which was a little over 6 feet wide. Okay?
Okay.
From a spacecraft moving at thousands of kilometers an hour,
Okay.
making that precision shot. And the best starfighter pilot in the Rebellion looked at that, or heard that prospect and said, even with a targeting computer, you can't do it. And the farm boy jackass next to him said, it's not possible, I did it all the time in my significantly slower aircraft, ground-bound aircraft, using a directed energy weapon instead of a physical missile. Alright? It took a literal space wizard in training to pull it off. Because, in case you forgot, without the power of the Force, he would have missed because those torpedoes turned 90 degrees twice to get in the hole. So my point is that igniting the exhaust from the admittingly extremely massive reactor that powers the Death Star could cause catastrophic feedback. Yes, it's like taking a lighter to the wisp smoke of a blown out candle and causing it to relight because that smoke is still hot enough to carry heat back to the wick. But it wasn't easy. One would argue a invasion of the Death Star and trying to take control of it might have been easier if the Rebellion had the resources to pull it off.
And it probably would have been necessary if they had more than one exhaust port.
Yes. Well, and keep in mind, that was a secondary exhaust port.
I know.
So it...
What I'm wondering is what exactly was built in to cause the reaction.
Space bullshit?
Probably.
I mean, again, fundamentally what's happening is that the exhaust is being ignited, and that's causing and that ignition is causing a blast back within a space magic reactor. But the point is that someone done that was not a small overlooked but easily recognizable design flaw. It was a pretty strong principle of engineering, taking advantage of something that couldn't be protected beyond the defenses that were already established on the Death Star, and had the Death Star mobilized its full complement of defense, because again, this is a planet with a planet-scale air force.
True.
And the Rebellion would have been easily swatted. Hubris, not engineering flaws, is what destroyed the first Death Star and the second Death Star. If anything, Starkiller Base was destroyed outright by good old-fashioned effort and intelligence.
Yeah.
And a pilot like Poe Dameron, who frankly is completely insane.
That's one hell of a pilot! Woo-hoo!
I think insane is giving them credit.
Well, to how Poe Dameron was portrayed as a pilot, he was portrayed the way I always pictured the character of Wedge Antilles was as a starfighter pilot. So they just took that and put it into film. I liked the idea of to move on as far as the rest of the Force Awakens is concerned. I liked the idea of Finn as a conscientious objector. That gunning down civilians was not. He didn't sign up for the First Order, but it was something that violated his conscience so much that he didn't pull the trigger and he tried to let people go, and he was busted for it.
Yeah. And the name alone was actually born from a serial number.
Which was a cute touch.
Actually fitting. You were never told a name your parents gave you, so what name are you used to being called?
Your number. Okay, FN, Finn. There. John Boyega did such a great job as it too, just being this guy who was so much just in the fan zone of everything. Like he knew someone who knew the history of the Star Wars universe and enough that it was like, wait, that. This is the Millennium. We're on the Millennium Falcon. And to watch that move on to other aspects in the
So he's the fanboy in all of us.
Yeah. He totally was. And then he got to experience what it was like to have his own fans with Rose.
True.
And Rose, again, was a fangirl of the universe and represented kind of the... Rose she wasn't the anti-Han Solo, but she was like a different kind of Han Solo. If Han Solo was the person who couldn't believe where the fuck they were and was smiling about it all, she was the person who was, oh my god, I can't believe where the fuck I am, this is amazing! And totally fangirling out on everything.
Mm-hmm.
I found it endearing. I know that a lot of people wrongly found her annoying as hell.
I saw her interesting as a character, but without much knowledge on the back history of the character, I didn't feel like I could connect to it.
Well,
I think that's what people didn't like more.
Was that you didn't feel any connection to...
Yeah. It felt like it was a chess piece popped into place. It didn't feel like it was one built up for the film.
And that's probably the biggest sin of the sequel trilogy, like I said, is that none of the films they don't feel like they have enough connective tissue between them, other than the scenes linking each other. And then hell, when we get to the Rise of Skywalker, there ain't shit connecting it to The Last Jedi. It's just all of a sudden you're there. Meanwhile, as far as interconnecting The Force Awakens to The Last Jedi, we have that they pick up right where each other left off with that whole, here's your lightsaber, and then Luke, who, let's remember, is a Jedi who exiled himself after the failure of him trying to revive the Jedi Order, so he did what Obi-Wan and Yoda did before him, looked at his lightsaber and said, I don't need this. What were you... And he asked the question of the fandom. What did you expect me to do? Take on the entire First Order with a laser sword? And unfortunately, the entire fandom seemed to have said, yes, that is exactly what I expect you to do. All I'm thinking is, no, I like old bastard Luke. I like old fatalistic. I have followed a path and I was wrong. And then to see in The Rise of Skywalker him go back on going back was even more unnerving. That's kind of the thing about the Rise of Skywalker that bothers me more than anything else. I liked The Last Jedi. I liked how that was going, how bringing balance to the Force was a failure if your goal was to recreate the Jedi Order, when really it should have been about the Force.
Yeah, I could see that.
And that's why earliest ancient Jedi textbooks were important, because from them there was no light side, there was no dark side. It was just, here's this magical thing and here's what we can do with it. And
your point does bring me to a very strong one. The whole point with that, a lot of people will have their own opinions, but from a standpoint of, for background, for me having an English degree, is the whole story is about how you create balance.
And the only way in the end to truly create balance, which is where I appreciated what The Rise of Skywalker did, was to wipe everything.
Was to a blank slate.
And Rey accomplished that, even as the granddaughter of Palpatine, which I'm still trying to piece that together, but to have Rey accomplish that by being, yes, her genetic heritage may be the dark side, but she rejects it. And here we have no Jedi, but we have no Sith, no dark side followers, no light side followers. It's just now about your potential in the Force and making sure you're using it for greater good, if that makes sense.
The greater good versus the right or wrong reason.
Yeah, or what is the right way to use the Force versus the wrong way. Is it wrong to generate Force lightning? Traditionalists would say yes, but I would like to believe that under Rey's, but under the ideas that Rey will now espouse, is to create a system where, what are you using the Force lightning for? Are you using it to protect, or are you using it to attack? Even Luke did a Force choke on a Gamorrean in Return of the Jedi.
Yeah.
2, actually. And one would argue that the old Jedi mind trick is far more insidious than lightning is. At least Force lightning is honest.
Yeah.
So,
and whenever I see the Force lightning, the only thing I can reflect back to is the Avatar when they use it to create energy. Which just has me giggling more of like, oh my, wonder how they'd react to that one.
Maybe we should do The Last Airbender.
Oh god. Are you trying to torture me?
No, but it's a good show.
Do you mean the show or the movie? The live-action horror film.
Moving right along. So yeah, I will say this about the sequel trilogy, and Mrs. A, you can confirm this. In the months after Carrie Fisher's death was announced, and seeing the Last Jedi in theaters, and then seeing that tribute to Carrie Fisher, I'm not gonna lie, I cried like a little bitch. and our oldest son was looking at me, he's just like, "What's wrong, Dad? Just let me have this boy." So, let's talk about Rogue One and Solo.
All right.
We had a great idea in both of these movies, but the execution was so wildly different.
I would have rather seen, honestly, I would have rather seen both of them as a miniseries. Or even as an animated series, just to play with it, a la Clone Wars.
I don't know about Rogue One. The story of Rogue One would have fit in so well with Star Wars Rebels.
Yes.
The Star Wars Rebels cartoon. And I guess we'll just mash the cartoons in there as well. But I do appreciate the Rogue One movie, and again, it was so well constructed, and I loved the fact that here we have a rebellion here we have members of the rebellion who are the assassins, the terrorists, the bombers, the suicide mission folks, the people who are not the savory heroes and generals and space wizards that make for good PR. No, here's the dirty, seedy underbelly of the rebellion that gets shit done.
The rebels among the rebels.
Well, not the rebels among the rebels, but the working rebels. You know, the people who are not George Washington.
Okay.
Or
the spy ring among the
or
rebels,
John
one
Paul
could
Jones,
say.
or all these others, but the the real working soldiers of it, who have to do brutal, seedy, and frankly morally questionable things in order to bring about the end of the empire that they see as corrupt and wrong and all those other ideals. And it worked. It took an idea that was frankly kind of antithetical to Star Wars, because Star Wars was about heroes, not murderers. Mm-hmm. And, about paragons, not renegades. And did it well. And then we have Solo. A movie that sounds great in concept, but no one asked for a Han Solo origin story. Because we didn't need one. No one wanted a Han Solo origin story, even though on paper it sounded good. Mm-hmm. We just kind of accept that here is a handsome, thick-chinned, well-hung Dudley Do-Right, and his giant 8-foot-tall teddy bear companion flying around in a space C-17. And
it's practically
going on adventures together.
It's pretty much the story of the one line everyone asks, how did that happen?
And the truth is we don't need it, because these guys are ready made to just appear and be there for what they need to do. So
yeah, they're the one characters that can be the chess piece that can be plopped in and pulled out as needed.
So I think the thing is that with Solo, they focused on all the wrong things. I don't need to know how Han Solo got his last name. That was dumb. I don't need to know how Han Solo got his iconic pistol, which, as it turns out, was a hunting carbine that had its barrel cut off and the stock removed. I didn't need that. I didn't need to know exactly what he meant by doing the Kessel Run in 12 parsecs when Han Solo bragging to someone that he assumed didn't know shit from Shinola would have worked. Mm-hmm. So all of that, it focused on the wrong things, when really what we needed was Han Solo doing heists. And doing heists that got him in touch with Jabba the Hutt. And in the end, the movie succeeded at that. Where it flopped along the way was the fact that it wasn't one consistent movie.
Yeah.
It was I like to say it was 3 short films. It was a train robbery film, it was a gold mine robbery film, and then it was a teenager enlists in the military and finds out war is hell film.
trouble is you're taking 3 different films and mashing them into one, and you don't exactly get a yummy pie from that.
And that's where, frankly, a miniseries or a Disney Plus series of Solo would have worked better. Kashyyyk, a solo story. Kessel, a solo story. Wherever that train robbery planet was in between them, a solo story. Those would have worked individually. Nice little 20-minute short films. You know, just like The Mandalorian. Mm-hmm. But we didn't get that. I did appreciate a couple of things that were in Solo that were... Emilia Clarke's character was fantastic. I love the fact that they threw in a reference to quite possibly the worst Star Wars video game ever.
Oh,
in
wow.
there, when she said she knew the martial art Terras Kasi. That was a reference to a PlayStation era Star Wars themed tournament fighting video game.
Oh my.
That was absolutely unplayable. The Angry Video Game Nerd did an episode on it, and it was precious. I loved the droid that believed in droid liberation. She was beautiful. And I complained a lot about the fact of here are things that were explained in Solo that didn't need to be explained. I actually really appreciate the fact that she became the AI of the Millennium Falcon. And thus became the sassy little bitch that 3PO is trying to communicate with in The Empire Strikes Back. That was good. And of course, Donald Glover as Lando Calrissian, who is quite possibly my favorite supporting character in all of Star Wars, is what was frankly Oscar worthy in how he portrayed it. My love of Lando Calrissian is such that I always say that a Star Wars movie without him would be better off with 100% more Lando Calrissian. Case in point, if he had shown up even briefly as a cameo in the Canto Bight sequence of the Last Jedi, would have been much better. Mm-hmm. You know, ideally, I would have liked to have had him there instead of Benicio del Toro, but yeah, beggars and choosers, right?
Yeah. Honestly, when it comes to Lando, I'm kind of looking forward to an idea of a granted, I think it'd be cool, but a mini series that's based around him. And preemptively his daughter, as we seem to be getting a suggestion of.
I could see from The Rise of Skywalker. Yeah, I could see that. I just want to see more. I want to see more Donald Glover as young Lando, just doing young Lando things, going from scheme to scheme, scam to scam. So
what I highly suspect is that I'd think what would end up happening is that he would be trying to take all the kids who were taken from their parents and reuniting with their parents if they were still alive, or if they even had any records. It would be one of those things that I could see him doing.
Maybe.
That's kind of my thought, but I'm.
So, let's talk about the non-movie stuff for a moment. We've got 4 television series. We've got Clone Wars, we've got Rebels, and we've got Resistance. Clone Wars, after a god knows how long hiatus, is finishing up its 7th and final season as we record, with the Siege of Mandalore 4-parter. And Clone Wars had its ups and downs. That whole season dedicated to bounty hunters was just weird. And the 3-parter that George Lucas himself wrote and directed should never have existed. Because, again, give George Lucas a chance to be self-indulgent, and he will take it and he will abuse it to high heaven. So those are two down points. High points for me, that whole story about the clone who discovers, oh, hey, we all have, like, subliminal programming that'll cause us to, like, kill all the Jedi, was a great final season thing. The bits and bobs about, in the first season, that 3-parter about General Grievous's flagship that had this new super weapon. Mm-hmm. That was a great little stunt. And I liked the Jar Jar episodes of Clone Wars. So...
Well, someone has to.
Rebels was a series that had to grow on me, personally. I thought that first season drug out way too long and was going nowhere. Mm-hmm. And then the second season rolled around, Ezra got his lightsaber, and the Inquisitor started chasing him around through space, and all sorts of other... Oh, and hey, here's Ahsoka Tano back. Mm-hmm. And it's just like, yes, now we're going somewhere. And it just got better and better and better, and then finally we had that last season where Grand Admiral Thrawn from the extended universe was coming over back into mainstream canon, and I think the entire fandom just orgasmed simultaneously for the rest of that final season. It was the epitome of a series that just got better and better and better. I don't know what your take is.
Unfortunately, I haven't seen all of them to be able to grasp, but I really like where it was going. The new characters, the introductions, the way they even show Ahsoka as being the mechanic.
And being wiser in the end.
Yeah. It's things like that I really appreciate. Although, for me, you also have a Resistance.
And that's something that you've seen and I haven't.
That is a very amusing one because it's practically the story of how the rebellion got a platform for refueling.
And that's been the focus of the whole story?
Well, not all of it. But the focus has been that the First Order is coming in and wanting to take over. But there's one spy. There's one rebellion spy and he has to learn how to become a spy. Literally, he's being thrown in. He's just a Jedi who's been thrown into it. and has to pretend he's a mechanic.
Oh boy. This is a wrench, right? No, that's a hammer. Oh.
And eventually they pull those moments of, I think Stargate Atlantis is what the one where they finally land in San Francisco. I mean, seriously, it is beyond. They're beyond stupid moments, and some of the episodes I'm like, huh?
But since they were made, especially these animated series were made for children on a children's channel, Disney XD for Rebels and Resistance, and Cartoon Network for Clone Wars. You're able to do that and get some slack, at least in the hypothetical. The next thing that's been going on, which has been a huge hit, it seems, and has launched 1,000 awes, is The Mandalorian.
Oh, yes.
That is a series that has not met my expectations at all, and I have gone from disappointed to thrilled as that series went on. When the baby carriage first opened up and we saw Baby Yoda's paw, you heard what I shouted from across the house.
Yes, I did.
I believe it was, oh, you've got to be fucking kidding me. I didn't really like the Mandalorian clan that was on this bounty hunter planet. Because I was identifying more with the Mandalorians from Clone Wars, was what it was. And so here was a group that was constantly fighting the urges of having a warrior culture past, and yet trying not to be warmongers anymore, because their history has been one of going up and going down, and going up and going down. So that spoke to me. And to see the Mandalorians see this Mandalorian clan, I kind of saw them the way I compare, like, Warren Jeff's group to the traditionalist or the fundamentalist LDS church compared to regular, normal, not weird and crazy Mormons. And that was, so it's just like, oh wow, you guys are just totally, things like not removing helmets bothered me, or weapons are a part of my religion bothered me. But then as episodes moved on and more characters were added, or we had episodes where we got to see the Mandalorian be a Mandalorian warrior, I grew more attached. Both the defending the primitive farm episode and the heist of the prison ship episode were my favorites up to that point. So
for me, I love The Mandalorian, and I love how you how you were going on about the culture, and it makes me kind of pull a kind of a quandary of, is this how we're going to see the clans be seen as?
Battletech?
Yeah. I mean, sure, you have Wolf in Exile, but would it become the subculture of a subculture thing? I almost wonder.
I don't know.
I don't expect that, but it's kind of it fits. It fits in my mind.
All right. I do know this. Gina Carano's character was instantly endearing to me. First off, I like Gina Carano. I liked her when she was in MMA, and I followed women's MMA more than men's because I felt that it was... Okay, I'll be honest. I liked watching women in booty shorts and sports bras beating the crap out of each other. But and she's not a bad actress. Now she needs non-action oriented roles in order to show some chops and expand. But we'll get there.
Yeah.
Either that, or she'll have a career like Michelle Rodriguez. So, Carl Weathers did a fantastic job in his role, and so as a supporting character, and I look forward to seeing... I kind of want to see more of him. The IG unit and the Ugnaught were... I don't get their popularity, personally. So, but fortunately, we won't have to deal with them anymore. So, and then of course there's Baby Yoda.
Baby Yoda.
The face that launched 1,000
Yeah.
With the chicky nuggies and the choco milk and all of that stuff. It made everyone suddenly want to be a parent.
Made everyone go, oh.
I wasn't thrilled with him at first. I don't know what I expected, but it wasn't that, and eventually I had to grow attached. And it was just one of those things. There wasn't a single moment that got me attached. It was as the series progressed over the 3-month run that, because Disney did a very smart thing and went back to weekly serials rather than dumping the season all at once. That got me.
I guess the Empire hasn't never been
There
accused of
wasn't a
subtlety,
singular
right?
event.
Yeah.
I mean, if I had to put a singular event to it, it was probably him looking at the Mandalorian and sipping his soup, going, "You guys done?"
It was the frog moment for me.
Vader, we were ambushed upon arrival, but I have the
I mean,
situation
it sounded like,
well in...
what? I'm eating.
I have no interest in your failures, Commander.
Well, we know it's on the
Here on a
force.
mission of my own.
I do want to see where that Moff who got his hands on the Darksaber, where that goes. And who also seemed to know a little about everything. But that just means that he was very good at being a Moff. So, let's touch on the last thing, just as a little aperitif before we go. Star Wars Holiday Special.
Oh, that was a right.
I don't think there are enough drugs for me to experience whatever the hell was going on in that whole thing.
Well, what dumb maneuver were they taking when they were filming anyway?
Oh, Carrie Fisher was clearly blitzed out of her skull when she was in there. You look, her pupils are fucking dilated, size of dinner plates. The holiday special, though, was very influential. It established Kashyyyk as the homeworld of the Wookiees. It established a lot about it established little bits and bobs about the Empire. I mean, hell, Life Day is an actual thing in the Star Wars universe. Holograms as a method of entertainment. Virtual reality is something that kind of exists. And just also just a bunch of the aliens that are in there. I mean,
Which is kind of okay.
What other forms of Star Wars media have we consumed?
The video games.
Yep.
The massive amount of video games.
As you're listening to this, you've been watching bits and bobs from a few Lego Star Wars, or from a few video games, including Lego Star Wars, including The Force Unleashed. I remember we were playing that Star Wars MMO for a while, and with some friends, and that always turned into a riot of our own little memes, like, why are we walking? We have speeders.
Oh yeah, and we have a friend who was converted to Judaism, so it was the Judai order.
That was what we called our clan, yeah.
Which we just kind of giggled. It was like 4 or 5 of us, but it was still worth it. It was good for the lulz.
There was another, let's see here. I played TIE Fighter and X-Wing at my cousin's house for like an entire week while we were visiting. I was very fond of Star Wars Dark Forces and the Shadows of the Empire, Nintendo 64 game. So, these days, I mean, I just bought a year after it came out, Jedi Fallen Order. It's interesting. I'm not sure I get the hype behind it, but I do appreciate a single-player Star Wars video game after all the multiplayer that have been made. There have been bad ones too. I remember there was a story after The Phantom Menace came out that was supposed to be about Obi-Wan Kenobi, while Anakin was getting his accelerated gunling training before following Obi-Wan.
What was the
and that was
what was the A's and Nays?
About it.
Well, they can't
The Lego Star Wars games, those are an exercise in chill.
Those are awesome.
Even as an adult, if you just want to wander around and do shit in a Star Wars themed universe, it's just, hi, here, yeah. I'm wandering around breaking shit, tooling shit up, it's fun.
It's like that with all the Lego ones. Lego anything is just kind of, it's
I found
easy.
the Lego Lord of the Rings, Harry Potter, and Batman ones to be kind of onerous. But the Star Wars and the Indiana Jones
5-4
ones, maybe it's
decision,
level of
6-3.
subject matter more than it is anything else. But those worked. Those two worked for me.
Well, sometimes there's ones that work better than others.
Yep. I've read a few Star Wars novels. I was read into Von Mark because I don't always have the best taste. But I liked it because it shook up the paradigm. That's why I was into it.
I've personally not read any of those ones that isn't quite in my wheelhouse.
There are lots of gives and takes in there. Timothy Zahn and Michael Stackpole are generally worth their weight. Karen Travis is an author who is very controversial. I don't care for her. I don't care for any of her work, actually, because I've read some non-Star Wars novels and I was just like, ew. But she has her defenders. Other than that, I mean, there have been guest writers of prominence who have written Star Wars stories. Ari Salvador, for example, has written a couple that are fine. And then there's a bunch of nobodies who are co-op. And then there are the workmen, like Stephen and Stephanie Perry, the father-daughter team, whose job really seems is to convert and expand comic books. So it seems. So, I mean, okay. I mean, it's journeyman stuff. It's so you can't really complain, but you get what you pay for. But yeah, it's the I do say this. The expanded universe got so wild and inconsistent over its 40-year history that when the Great EU Purge of 2012 happened, it was necessary. Not only was it was necessary to not trap the story in the EU going forward, but it was also necessary to allow stories to pick and choose from the EU rather than following everything. Grand Admiral Thrawn being in Star Wars Rebels wouldn't have happened without purging all of the Thrawn tales from the EU. And we ended up getting Thrawn, and we got Thrawn in a manner where the character was true to how Timothy Zahn wrote him, and Timothy Zahn was involved in Thrawn episodes of Rebels to boot, so you can't say it wasn't authentic, without bogging him down in things like, the Mad Jedi Jorah Sabaoth and Luke fighting his own clone and weird shit like that.
Cannot disguise yourself from me, Jedi.
So, you know, there were... I will always argue that purging the EU is for the greater good. And as time goes on, Disney will pluck things from it that will allow it to go forward. I'd like to see some things like not only from the Vong Saga, but some of the other the Empire Skunk Works pulling out weird half-assed World Devastator type weaponry, you know, in their last throws, like pulling together a prototype of the Galaxy Gun or trying to create their planet-consuming droid factories.
Where is your master?
And other stuff.
Clouded your mind. You killed my
without
master years
being
ago.
word for word from
what
what happened in the Rogue Squadron books, for example. So, Anyway, yeah, that's our mishmash of thoughts. I mean, nothing original. We didn't say it was going to be. It was just going to be us splooging about Star Wars on Star Wars Day. So.
Yep, pretty much.
So, if you like what you heard, be sure to hit the like and subscribe buttons. You can follow us here on the Arbitration Studios YouTube page. You can follow our Battletech themed podcast over on OurBattletech.com. Be sure to follow us at JP Arbiter on Twitter and at HL Arbiter on Twitter for you.
It's HL Arbiter at Highlight Cosplay.
Oh, at High Lady Cosplay. Okay, on Twitter. So, and yeah. Just if you like what you heard and want us to do more of it, feel free to give us a little comment. So, with that, we'll be seeing you, kids.
Later. May the 4th be with you.
Always.